Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the third and final session of this year's ASEAN Roundtable on Reimagining ASEAN Unity in an Age of Division. The moderator of this panel is Ms. Sharon Seah, Senior Fellow and Coordinator of the Climate Change in Southeast Asia program at the ISEAS Yusof Ishak Institute. Her panelists are Ambassador Loro Horta, Ambassador Gusti Agung Wesaka Puja, and Professor Nguyen Tung. I will now turn over the time to the moderator. Ms. Seah, please.
Thank you, Indira. And very warm welcome to everyone back to this last session. And it's usually the last session that shows the level of commitment to ASEAN. So thank you very much for staying with us. Yes, Ambassador? All committed, very good. First, a very big thank you to ASEAN Studies Center for inviting me to moderate this panel. It's been great just sitting and being a guest and not doing the running around this year. Thank you so much. And also thank you to my bosses at ISEAS for supporting my return for this roundtable. The theme of our panel is Reimagining ASEAN Unity in an Age of Division. And I think the word reimagining has been spoken of in several panels before. We will start with Ambassador Loro Horta, who will talk about what Timor-Leste can do to uphold ASEAN centrality. Ambassador Horta is currently the ambassador of Timor-Leste to China. He has previously served as ambassador to Cuba and also had served as counselor at the embassy in Beijing. He's been writing on China for more than 20 years, and he is also an alumni of the RSIS at Nanyang Technological University. He has also previously attended the Chinese National Defense University and the U.S. Naval Postgraduate School, as well as the American National Defense University, and I see we have an Australian connection to the Sydney University. So Ambassador Loro will be, of course, talking about the highlight of this week of meetings in KL, which is the formal admission of Timor-Leste as the 11th member of ASEAN, and with that, it actually completes the geographical footprint of ASEAN finally. And our second speaker will be Ambassador Gusti Agung Wesaka Puja. And Ambassador Puja will be talking to the theme of From Talk to Trust, and can ASEAN deliver on peace building? And Ambassador Puja is not a stranger to ASEAN. He is currently the executive director of the ASEAN Institute for Peace and Reconciliation, a very important institute that promotes peace. He was previously the ambassador of Indonesia to the Netherlands and the Perm Rep to the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, and as well as Indonesia's ASEAN SOM leader, and served in the task force for the ASEAN Community post-2015 vision from 2012 to 2016. So he has a lot of experience with ASEAN. Ambassador was also previously ambassador to Austria, Slovenia, and the PR to the UN, as well as other IOs in Vienna. He has experience as well with the World Trade Organization and other international organizations, including with the IAEA, being on the IEA's Board of Governors from 2011 to 2012, and the Sherpa to the Nuclear Security Summit. So I think we'll have a very rich discussion with Ambassador Puja. And last but not least, our third speaker is Professor Nguyen Tung, formerly the president of the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam. He will speak to the ASEAN Vision 2045 that we've heard about in the last sessions, and what will make the vision tangible. Ambassador Nguyen is Professor of International Relations, and he was also previously Ambassador of Vietnam to Korea from 2020 to 2023. He received his PhD in political science from Columbia University, and he has published a book flying blind, Vietnam's decision to join ASEAN. So he has that inside view into Vietnam's decision to become a part of ASEAN. And with these introductions done, I will pass the time over to Ambassador Horta.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity. It's always a great pleasure being in Singapore. The question, what can Timor do to uphold ASEAN centrality, I think is a very polite way, a very ASEAN way to ask, is Timor going to be a burden, or Timor-Leste is going to be an asset for ASEAN? Well, so I certainly think that Timor-Leste will not be a burden to ASEAN, neither economically, politically, or diplomatically. Timor-Leste, when we gained our independence, we were the seventh most poor country in the world, measured by the HDI, by the United Nations Human Development Index. Today, we have climbed more than 40 slots in less than 23 years of independence. There are 3 countries in the ASEAN family who are at a lower HDI level than we are. We have at the moment 1 doctor per 1,300 inhabitants. I think only Singapore matches this in Southeast Asia. In terms of Transparency International ranks, I think only 3 ASEAN countries are doing better than us. Of course, all these ranks are relative. We have eradicated malaria. Someone was talking about malaria and dengue. We have eradicated malaria, tetanus, polio. And life expectancy has increased by 10 years for women and 8 years for men. These are UN statistics. It's not me making them up. They can be looked for. So there's been a lot of achievements. In terms of infrastructure, the whole country now has access to electricity and the internet. We have one of the lowest crime rates in Asia. This is not to say that we don't have challenges. Oh yes, we have plenty of challenges. Our economy is highly dependent on oil and gas at 90% of the GDP. If I'm not mistaken, this is the highest dependence in the world. So we urgently need to diversify our economy. Youth unemployment is a serious problem. 70% of our population is younger than 35, and unemployment is a serious problem because the oil sector doesn't generate much work. You know, it's oil platforms in the sea and demands highly skilled workers, so they don't generate a lot of work. So unemployment is a serious problem. As I mentioned, we have many achievements to be proud of, but I think one of the biggest shames of our country in our 23 years of independence is that we're still always among the 10 worst countries when it comes to child malnutrition. So food security is an issue that needs to be addressed. Several governments have made a priority of diversifying the economy priority. However, I'm afraid to say that we have not made much progress in that field. Currently, we rely, as I mentioned, on the oil and gas sector. We now are negotiating with Australia because there's what is called the Greater Sunrise oil field that has an estimated value of about $75 billion worth of oil and gas. I think Australia has made a very generous proposal, unseen, I think, in the history of oil negotiations between a poor country and a developed one. Such a small nation as Timor-Leste and a regional power like Australia. Australia has offered 90% of the revenues to Timor-Leste and said that they will offer the 10% that is for Australia is supposed to be invested in an infrastructure fund to help Timor-Leste. Australia further promised to increase the number of migrant workers into Australia. I think we have now 15,000. Australia has pledged to increase even further that number, helping a lot alleviate the problem of youth unemployment. I sincerely hope that this agreement is signed in the very foreseeable future. Right now, we have about $18 billion in our sovereign oil fund. At the current rate of spending, the oil fund will run out in about 7 years, because the current oil fields are already dry. They're not operational. So we hope that I hope that we are able to sign the agreement with Australia. The government is considering other partners such as China, and negotiations are ongoing with Australia. I personally think that the Australian proposal is quite genuine and a good one, but of course that is up to the two governments to reach an agreement. I hope they reach an agreement. 90% of 74 billion, in addition to the infrastructure that Australia has promised to invest, and this will ensure Timor-Leste's financial and economic stability for at least 3 to 4 decades. Therefore, we won't be an economic burden to ASEAN, at least for the next 40 decades. On the diplomatic and political front, I've read some arguments in academia and the media that somehow, because Timor-Leste is a democratic country, this could upset the balance between countries who are democratic and non-democratic. Well, Timor-Leste will always respect ASEAN's norms and strategic culture. We may have differences in terms of issues such as human rights, but we know when we should voice them and under what circumstances and in which forums we should do so. Our diplomacy has been fairly successful for a small country like ours. We have successfully reconciled with Indonesia through our Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We have successfully settled our maritime borders with Australia. We have entered ASEAN when many used to say, well, you'll never enter ASEAN. You will never fix your maritime borders with Australia. Well, we proved them wrong. Despite being a small country, we have assisted financially and with technical expertise Guinea-Bissau in West Africa to hold elections and transition to democracy. We have assisted with financial assistance and also equipment and technicians, election experts. São Tomé and Príncipe hold these elections, Nepal, Papua New Guinea. Just last month, Portugal, a country with one we share nearly 500 years of history together, suffered massive wildfires, the worst in their history, and we sent $10 million in assistance to Portugal. We are a small country, but we have a big heart and a rich soul. So I think this is what we will contribute to ASEAN. We have been involved even in mediating the release of hostages in places like Colombia. So we have had a very active diplomacy, and I think we can be an asset for ASEAN. As was mentioned during our ceremony of entrance into ASEAN, you have in the same table European Commissioner Antonio Costa from Portugal sitting at the table, President Lula da Silva, a very old friend of Timor-Leste, in the same table, and General Prabo. So this shows that our friendships go across continents despite our size. And I think we will be a diplomatic asset to ASEAN and certainly not a burden. In terms of our foreign policy, I don't think we are going to cause any major embarrassment either. I heard a theory that there were two arguments. Some saying that Timor should join, otherwise will become a Chinese, may fall into the evil spell of China. The Western media loves this kind of romances. And the other was, no, if Timor-Leste joins ASEAN, it will become sort of a satellite of China like Laos and Cambodia. Well, I find the Cambodians to be very independent-minded when they want, and the same thing for the Laotians. Let's look at Chinese presence in Timor. Actually, we are the only country in ASEAN which China is not our biggest trading partner. Indonesia is our biggest trading partner. Most of our military and defense cooperation is with Australia, with New Zealand, with Portugal, very little with China. Yes, we enjoy very close relations with China. However, our foreign policy has been always very independent. The idea that somehow China is going to dominate Timor, well, many have tried to dominate Timor. Portugal tried, then came the Japanese, then the Indonesians, and they left. You see, we are so disorganized and undisciplined that it's very difficult to dominate us, you know. So I wish good luck to the Chinese, assuming that's what they want, which I don't think that's their intention. China has been crucial in developing our infrastructure, in assisting us with agriculture, and there have been some concerns in Australia, particularly after the Solomon Islands signed a security treaty with Australia in April 2022. The Australians are very worried that if the Chinese help us build the pipeline in our oil sector in the southern part of the island, which is about 300 nautical miles from Northern Australia, from Darwin, whereas, you know, 70% of the Australian military is concentrated in the Northern Territories, in Darwin area, and there are also US military personnel there. So one of the theories that some sectors in Australia has is that somehow if China builds the infrastructure for Timor, the oil infrastructure in the south coast, that Timor will fall into the debt trap, and in exchange, China will demand a port and open a base in the southern part of Timor-Leste. That's a very nice, wonderful theory. I think Spielberg will be proud of it, and George Lucas also. We will never allow a foreign base in Timor-Leste. Australia has offered to have a company, just a mere company, stationed in Timor for training and exercise, and we still did not accept that. So to think that we are going to allow the Chinese military presence there is just, I think, unrealistic. So Timor-Leste is not going to be a burden to ASEAN politically, diplomatically, and economically. As I mentioned, we are very active diplomatically. We have a policy of zero enemies. We're a small and poor country, as I mentioned, but we have a big heart and a noble soul. And I think this is what we want to contribute. This is what we think we can bring to ASEAN. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Horta, for the very candid and frank assessment about Timor-Leste's situation, including the geopolitical considerations. And maybe when we come back to the Q&A, we can talk a little bit more about how ASEAN can help Timor to find economic diversification, and also a little bit more about the dynamics that will change within ASEAN. And our next speaker is Ambassador Puja. Over to you.
Thank you, Sharon, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for this opportunity. Speaking after Ambassador Horta, he brings me to my fond memory working together with his father, President Horta, back to 2005. Then he was the foreign minister of Timor-Leste at the time, when we negotiating the term of reference on the Commission of Truth and Friendship, and back and forth almost in every month in Bali. So that's where then in 2005 we managed to establish this Commission of Truth and Friendship between Indonesia and Timor-Leste in 2005 in Bali. And subsequently at the same time also, I have to burden another responsibility for negotiating peace processes with the Free Aceh movement in Helsinki. It was a process of 5 years from the year 2000, mediated by first Henry Dunant Center, then Humanitarian Dialogue Center, and then from 2005, after tsunami, mediated by former President of Finland, Matti Ahtisaari, a Peace Nobel laureate. there's a too heavy responsibility on me actually. Uh, Certainly bring me a lot of experience and learn about peace because in my previous career, at the early career of mine in the foreign ministry, I was also involved in the early peace processes on Cambodia in 1988 in Bogor. It's called Jakarta Informal Meeting or Cocktail Party with four factions there: Hun Sen, Kyu Sampan, Prince Ranarit, and Son San. And I was a liaison officer of one of the factions leader, Kyu Sampan, the Khmer Rouge leader. So it gives me a lot of fond memory and comes to my conviction actually. Peace is a question of will, and all conflicts can be settled, and there are no excuse for allowing them to become eternal. And this I quote from President Marty Ahtisaari, the Nobel Peace Laureate in 2008. What human started, human can end. All conflict must be resolved, although they may take different time span. And the only people that can make peace are the parties to the conflicts. And just as they are responsible for the conflicts and its consequences, so should they be given responsibility and recognition for the peace. So with this, I recall what the former Indonesian Foreign Minister Ali Alatas said during the negotiations between the government of Republic of the Philippines and the Moro National Liberation Front in 1993 in the Philippines. I quote, "When the barrels of the guns are silent, the voice of reason has chance to be heard." So with this, I touch now upon the ASEAN and peace building. I recall in the previous sessions, we talked about half empty glass and half full of glass. And even somebody talked about the leak of the half empty glass. But for me, the most important is not about the discussion of the half empty glass or half full glass, but for us, where the tap is. So we have to find the taps and then to be more innovative in trying to find solutions. Of course, ASEAN members have taken some best practices of preventing, mediating, and resolving conflicts in the past. This is also true, especially for post-conflict reintegrations, reconciliation, and peace building. There have been various models of peace and conflict resolutions in our regions, which involve the third-party mediators, each with its own lessons learned and their achievement and shortcomings. In addition to those three peace processes I mentioned, there are also case of Southern Mindanao in the Philippines back to 1996 to 2014, peaceful resolutions in the Cambodian-Thailand border, 2011, and recently Malaysia mediated between Cambodia and Thailand, and a number of border issues between some ASEAN member states through ICJ, including the role of Malaysia in the southern Thailand. However, elephant in the room which exists in our regions remains as a litmus test for ASEAN. Those testing the limits of ASEAN unity and its policy of non-interference. While ASEAN today is not lacking in informal institutions and framework to promote trust and confidence, as well as to address potentials for conflict among member states, there is, in practice, a scarcity of resort to such capacities. It is important to raise the question of why ASEAN institutions and frameworks have seldom been formally invoked over situations within and between ASEAN member states. We have a former Secretary General of ASEAN here, Mr. Ong Keng Yong, is very aware about this very issue. Many highlighted the significance of ASEAN-led mechanism and or tools such as the Bangkok Declarations, 1967, Zone of Peace, Freedom, and Neutrality, 1971, Treaty of Amity and Corporations in Southeast Asia, 1976, as well as principles laid out within the ASEAN Charter and the UN Charter. Although the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation has not officially invoked in addressing interstate conflict, its norms and principles actually have been of real relevance. TAC and ASEAN Charter provide affirmations of ASEAN's rejections of aggressions and the threat or use of force or other actions in any manner inconsistent with international law, as well as its reliance on peaceful settlement. It is to ensure that ASEAN becomes a net contributor to regional and international peace and security by demonstrating its capacity to maintain the peace and stability of its own immediate regions. However, as former Indonesian Foreign Ministers observed, Marty, I quote, ASEAN needs to contend with an apparent gap between reliance on the so-called ASEAN way and a more formal rules-based ASEAN, end of the quotation. We are certainly fully aware that peace building is a complex and multidimensional exercise. It utilizes a variety of actors in the construction of culture of peace to replace a structure of violence. And looking at the challenges of this region, it is believed that to establish a robust approach needs to be done, including a new kind of partnership that place greater emphasis on cooperations, on the pursuit of common security, common prosperity, and stability to transform the trust deficit into a strategic partnership. And strengthening the effectiveness of ASEAN institutions in terms of decision-making in urgent and emergency situations was also the subject of discussion in ASEAN to anticipate the future dynamics. This to guide ASEAN and support ASEAN leaders' decisions and considerations on particular issues to arrive at the decisions in a timely manner. Of course, the reality is something different now. ASEAN also adopted the rules of procedures to support decision-making process, serves as a guide and facilitate the process to refer matters to ASEAN summit in urgent and specific situations where consensus cannot be reached, and allow them to arrive at the decisions and effectively respond to urgent situations in a timely manner and within the corridor of the ASEAN Charter. So let me touch a bit on the future of peace building, moving beyond words, including also the inclusive peace. First, representation. To make sure that all components of society are represented, have a say and make contributions. Maintaining peace is not only the responsibility of the governments or figures of authority, but a constant work involving all stakeholders, including civil society. Peace building is not a one-person show. By giving all peace stakeholders a say, it will increase ownership over any peace-building efforts and will exponentially increase the strength and quality of peace. Second, contextuality. Our society and circumstances are always evolving. Peace is not always the same for all communities. Communities live in different circumstances and face their unique challenges. Therefore, it is important to always have a proper analysis of every situation and tailor designs the situation. Third, collaborations. The peace achieved together must be maintained together. Collaborations effort will help detect any possible emerging issues and find ways to address it before it escalates into a crisis. Collaborative work will also strengthen ownership and tackle issues from the required multi-angle aspect. Actually, there are already exist several ASEAN mechanisms on early detections of crisis and its subsequent avenues to resolve. To what level these mechanisms have been utilized is another matter entirely, as oftentimes ASEAN is better at responding to crises on a ad hoc manner rather than invoking existing mechanism it has already put in place to address these very matters or reinvent a wheel. And ASEAN chair sometimes play very important role. This is the case of the Thai-Cambodian border, both in 2011 and this year, 2025. And regional institution role should not only managing major power relations, but to increase their capacity to solve problems, improve the skills supported by norm structures and mechanisms. However, the question remains, does ASEAN want to maintain the same mechanisms and fully utilize or operationalize them or strengthen them? Or does it want to establish new mechanisms, new systems, but not make use of them when the time comes? How to make the mechanisms relevant? For this reason, actually, the ASEAN IPR, in collaboration with the Crisis Management Initiative, in November next month, will organize an introductory training on conflict analysis and conflict resolutions for the ASEAN Secretariat and ASEAN bodies, centers, and entities in Jakarta, with the theme Making Peace in the 21st Century, Module 1. Actually, ASEAN Institute for Peace and Reconciliation actually is part and parcel of the ASEAN reform. But not all of our innovative initiatives actually receive consensus. In particular, when we introduce the establishment of the panel of the wise, for example, to help our regions to find wise solutions. So with this, I'm running out of time now. In conclusion, I just would like to say that there are no quick wins in today's conflicts, and peace is always work in progress, and we need patience and perseverance, even though we must walk through dense fogs and bumpy roads. The added value actually on this, we need to create space for dialogue, to understand the limits, opening inclusive dialogue, sustainable efforts, listening more, and able to speak wisely. As said, if we do not guide the peace process, conflict will reoccur. Peace is certainly not a one-stop process. It is a process which includes also to prepare the unexpected, and peace cannot be taken for granted. Even in the storm, there is peace. We hope cooler heads will always prevail. We work hard in silence. Let your success be your noise. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Puja. Actually, ASEAN itself is a peace project. ASEAN was established to manage intra-regional conflicts and to manage the differences between its members. So in that way, what you said about peace being a work in progress, ASEAN itself is also a work in progress. And what had happened this year between Thailand and Cambodia was really a wake-up call. And it reminds us how fragile that peace is and how, as a family, ASEAN really needs to work together to keep that on track and ensure that there's always dialogue and that there can be avenues for mediation and conciliation. So I really want to go back to discussing some of these issues later during the Q&A. And our final speaker, Professor Nguyen, over to you. You will tell us how the ASEAN Community Vision 2045 can be made relevant for ASEAN.
Thank you very much, Sharon, for inviting me in this panel. And first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers, especially Mr. Choi, for the invitation for me to this important event. I think that my presentation would be separated into two parts. Part one, I would like to explain how I see 2025 is a reminder of how important ASEAN is to the members and to the region and beyond. And part 2 is about answering the question, what will make ASEAN Vision 2045 tangible? I think that there are at least 4 events that can be serving as the reminder of how important ASEAN is. Event number 1 is the expansion of ASEAN to include East Timor. It's a coincidence that Vietnam joined ASEAN just 30 years ago in 1995, and it's a very good reminder for us, both policymakers and the people and the academics of the decision of Vietnam to join ASEAN that year. And the consensus in Vietnam is that it is a very good, very effective and very wonderful decision, because without ASEAN, Vietnam could not reach the level of developments that we are seeing. What is the more impressive about the East Timor joining ASEAN this time around is the reaction from the population. I do not have the opportunity to witness the reaction from other countries, but from what I read about East Timor, people's reaction this morning, Deputy Minister Liu was talking about the moving scene when ASEAN admitted East Timor, and similar kind of attitude I saw in Vietnam. We see that now we have a new member, East Timor, and now the East Timor is on the path of development that Vietnam is enjoying. And what is more interesting is that the people's attitude reflects the people's awareness of ASEAN, and that suggests that ASEAN is somehow becoming people-oriented, because people are getting more interested in ASEAN following the events happening in and around ASEAN, and people are more believing in ASEAN. Event number 2 is what is happening between Thailand and Cambodia, and that is really important for us to be reminded that there are existing some principles that are within the what we call ASEAN way, and there are some moments that the members seems to forget it, and now we have to remember it. And thanks to ASEAN, things got back to normal, not getting worse, and it is the vindication of ASEAN way and the principles that we should not be forgetting. Event number 3 is the tariff, reciprocal tariff for the whole year until now. Mr. Trump is creating problems for many countries in ASEAN, and with the summit, before and around the summit, some agreements have been reached between the US and some key members of ASEAN, including Vietnam. And I think that it suggests us 2 things. One is that the ASEAN convening power is still there, because Mr. Trump would be having more difficulty meeting ASEAN leaders to talk about this kind of thing, and ASEAN offers a very convenient place for things to happen like that. And 2 is that the presence of Mr. Trump in this event in Malaysia shows that he could come to ASEAN meeting with his own agenda, but the recognition of ASEAN centrality, the recognition of ASEAN's importance to the US interest, either economic or geostrategic, is there. So I think that it is also a good reminder for us and for other countries, including the United States, that ASEAN is still important. Next is the also related to the reciprocal tariff is about the importance of ASEAN internal economic cooperation. So the reciprocal tariffs is a reminder for the ASEAN members that the ASEAN economic cooperation, either bilaterally or either in the collective form, ASEAN Economic Community, for example, is very important in at least to diversifying the economic ties that the members that would have for economic development at home. So I think that that is the reason why we want to invest in more economic cooperation between and among the members, and also in ASEAN-wide economic projects. That is why, by the way, for 2025, Vietnam established a comprehensive strategic partnership with key ASEAN members, including Indonesia and Malaysia. And that is suggesting the tendency in Vietnam's relations with ASEAN. And ASEAN, I think we also see the intensification of the US-China competition. And I think that it also a reminder for ASEAN members that at least the regional strategic landscape can be more complicated, but at least among ASEAN members, we have peace being built in the region, and we can be a little bit relieved by the fact that the regional countries in Southeast Asia are basically at peace with each other, and it is something like an oasis among the more complicated strategic landscape beyond ASEAN. So I think that it drives me, all these the events that I just shared with you seems to suggest that the ASEAN project, either in economic or in geopolitical terms, are really of existential importance for ASEAN. And I think that I would like to quote the definition of security applied to ASEAN. So ASEAN is like oxygen. When you are going to lose it, then you feel the existence of it. So I think that this is, you can accuse me of being of adopting a minimalist approach, but it is basic. And I think that the year of 2025 is a reminder of the basic importance of ASEAN. Now, how we can make the ASEAN vision to 2045 tangible, I think that the speakers before me have mentioned all the solutions for that. But from what I can add is that 4 points. Point number 1 is about upholding the principles. So when we engage in the ASEAN project, the upholding of the principles are very important. Never forget the principle, never forget the ASEAN way, and think of this principle before doing anything. That is, I think, applied not only for national leaders, but for the business leaders and communities leaders as well. Point number 2 is related to point number 1, is about the minilateral approach. So when we are upholding the basic principles of ASEAN, we are applying the multilateralism in ASEAN in the big M. And all the projects, including connectivity or peace building, reduction of developmental gaps, are the ASEAN-wide projects. But the equal importance should be applied to the mini-lateral projects that involve either the sub-regional regions in ASEAN. I can name Mekong, the triangle development that include Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia, things like that. And we can also think of the specific area for cooperation that might include biomass energy cooperation, South China Sea. So we think, I think that the minilateral approach actually is not new. It is about the ASEAN minus X approach that we have been discussing before, but it is now the time for us to more eagerly and proactively to do something about it. And at the same time, ASEAN countries individually should be developing relations with other ASEAN countries and the extra regional countries. So the development of the bilateral relations of individual ASEAN members is also very important. In terms of institutional arrangements, I would like to remind us about the discussion about Troika formula. So the current, the former, and the future ASEAN chairs would be working closely together in order to make sure that the continuity in terms of policy and in terms of project performance would be there. And I think with regard to East Timor, the Troika would be really much helpful because it would be something like a training ground for the new members to be more proactive in the ASEAN project. So with that, I thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Nguyen. This is actually the first time that I've heard about minilateral approach being taken within ASEAN, because typically when we talk about minilateral, we are thinking about ASEAN engaging in some kind of minilateral approach with its dialogue partners. Yeah, so the idea of doing it within ASEAN, respecting the sub-regional cooperation, the sub-regional bodies, is a really good reminder for us. Before I go into the Q&A, because today we have talked about institutional reform and our panel is about reimagining ASEAN, I thought that this is a theme that we can start with in the Q&A. For the benefit of those who were not with us in the beginning of the day, our keynote speaker, Deputy Minister Liu Chintong, was the one who started the ball rolling, and he talked about how ASEAN could be better resourced to help itself, and he talked about how richer countries can contribute more towards ASEAN. And then later on, this was picked up by Professor Titinan in his intervention when he talked about the ASEAN Secretary General's term, 5 years being too long. Perhaps we could have it 2 years or even 1 year, and also professionalizing the ASEAN Secretariat. I wanted to pick up on that and pose the first question to Ambassador Nguyen, because in your points you talk about maintaining some of the institutional mechanisms. I wonder if you could, with the benefit, of course, of our former ASEAN Secretary General, Ambassador Ong Keng Yong, being in the room, perhaps we could have a discussion on really how can ASEAN be made fit for the future. When we look back in 2045 to this point in 2025, would we be able to say with satisfaction that ASEAN has done something to reform itself in order to get to that vision of 2045, to being a people-oriented, people-centric organization? is there room, and I hate to say this because when we talk about reforming secretariat, reforming contribution and terms, it actually means opening the ASEAN Charter up for a review, which we know has been tried and tested first by the Philippines and has actually been killed by the process of death by bureaucracy within the Secretariat. There is, by the way, a 30-page document floating somewhere in the Secretariat about reviewing the reforms. How can we do this without opening a whole Pandora's box about reforming ASEAN legally? Is there any way we can do this by changing the norms within ASEAN?
This question seems to be a little too big for me, but I think that it relates to the very the basic design of ASEAN. So what power that the members are going to give to the section personally and to ASEAN Secretariat? Correct me if I'm wrong, but in 1945, when the big powers and other countries decided to establish the United Nations, they intended from very beginning that the Secretary General would be a weak position. He would not be giving too much power. So that is the basic design from the very beginning. So when we are talking about the term of the SecGen, 5 years too long, or okay, the power of the Secretariat, we have to address the basic design of what power the members of ASEAN would be willing to give to him, her, or to the Secretariat. Yeah, and I think it would take some more time.
I see a hand at the back.
I forgot to, just 2 seconds, I forgot to mention the benefit of having Troika. We can extend the term of the chairman to 3 years.
Sorry, you mean the term of the country chair?
Yeah. The chair can serve 3 years. 1 year as the actual chair, 1 year as the former and future.
I see. So this is also addressing Tan Sri Nazia's point about ASEAN being a dysfunctional company that has a short one-term chairman but a long 5-year term CEO. Okay. I think Peter, you have a question?
Thank you. I think ASEAN Charter will have to be revised to include Timor-Leste as new member state. And then 2 other important documents also need to be revised. The Treaty of Amity and Cooperation to include Timor-Leste as another high contacting party that will join the High Council in case it is constituted. Also, the Treaty of Convened nuclear weapon-free zone also have to be revised. But I actually like to comment on the admission of Timor-Leste into ASEAN. When I served at the ASEAN Secretariat, I did travel to Delhi a few times to give some training. What I can see are practical challenges. Now you are inside ASEAN. Timor-Leste government may not have enough ministers, senior officials to attend all ASEAN meetings. And that's very important. You mentioned about ASEAN centrality. ASEAN centrality, the external dimension is the convening power of ASEAN. People come to our meeting. But more importantly, ASEAN centrality is the internal dimension, how member states give importance to ASEAN, fulfill ASEAN commitment, attend ASEAN meetings, implement ASEAN agreement. If you don't come to ASEAN meeting, ASEAN cannot make a decision the way we are right now. by consensus. So it's very important that you prepare your minister and senior official to come to ASEAN meeting. And this leads to another practical issue. Timor-Leste is the only new member state in ASEAN without any direct flight to any ASEAN capital. Not to Jakarta, not to Singapore. We have to connect in Bali. So that will be a practical issue that you will encounter, even your own delegation coming out to ASEAN to attend ASEAN meetings. So that's another important challenge. By the year 2029, after Thailand, Timor-Leste will be in line to chair ASEAN. I'm not sure whether you have enough facilities to do so or not. If you want to chair ASEAN by the year 2029, then you have to start building right now, I think. But I have a question for all the panelists. We heard about idea how to change or improve ASEAN decision. Consensus may not work anymore. At least mathematically, it's 10% more difficult to reach consensus with 11 members. By the way, the problem of budget allocation is temporarily solved with new member to come in to contribute. So it can be postponed for the time being. But my question to all the panelists is whether or not we can look into a new way of making decision. Well, we heard about original 5 member plus X. Well, that's one big idea. So whether it is time that we look into new way of making decision. Professor Tung mentioned about ASEAN minus X, but that is only for implementing economic agreement. It's not about decision making. So if we want to be more efficient in decision making, can we look into new formula? Thank you.
Boy, am I glad I'm not a panelist. But maybe we will start with Ambassador Horta. Is it related?
Yes, it is.
Okay, we'll take that second question.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Anish Mishra from the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. I would like to thank the panelists for this brilliant presentations. So my question is related to the previous question. I mean, Professor Nguyen, you wrote that very famous book called Flying Blind, which explains why Vietnam, joined ASEAN and the process. So if anybody wants to understand about Vietnam joining ASEAN, they have to read your book, Flying Blind. And Vietnam actually led the way for more countries to join into ASEAN. After Vietnam joined, then Myanmar and Laos joined, and Cambodia joined after that. And we also see there's some similarities between Timor-Leste joining ASEAN and Vietnam joining ASEAN. For example, when in the Cambodia war following the Vietnam invasion of Cambodia, ASEAN states were on a coalition cause with Vietnam, but yet that history was put aside. And after the fall of the Soviet Union, when there was no more security guarantees and aid for Vietnam from the Soviets, Vietnam decided to join. And Timor-Leste also, there was a war with Indonesia, but that history is put aside, and now Timor-Leste is joining. But the process is very different, from Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. These were countries that took some time to establish themselves, and then through the change of history and the end of the Cold War, then joined. In the case of Timor-Leste, of course, I do congratulate Timor-Leste for joining ASEAN, but Timor-Leste is not just new in ASEAN, it's also a very new country in the world. It became independent very recently. And as the gentleman spoke earlier, that what if, when it's Timor-Leste's turn to become the chairman of ASEAN, how is Timor-Leste going to host ASEAN summits? Does it has that infrastructure to join? And would we see ASEAN minus X being more used for the Timor-Leste? I mean, is Timor-Leste going to be the next Cambodia or Laos in ASEAN? Because are you going to be bracket in that category to be, the lower LDCs of ASEAN because of the current, level of development in Timor-Leste? So, what is Timor-Leste action plan to actually, I think a lot of internal reforms within Timor-Leste is also required to to play this new role of an ASEAN member. I mean, ASEAN, you would have a veto power in ASEAN, for example, to pass something in ASEAN. Timor-Leste wouldn't have the power now to veto in ASEAN because, ASEAN works on consensus of all the 11 member states. So that's my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, actually, to answer that the query that you had about Timor-Leste's accession, it is the first post-ASEAN Charter country to be admitted to ASEAN. So the process was much more difficult than before. But I will pass it over to Ambassador Horta.
Thank you very much for your questions. Concerning, yes, you're absolutely right. That ASEAN as the more flashy side, which is the summits that give ASEAN the international prestige. And then there is the technical bureaucratic side that is indeed a challenge, is going to be a challenge for us. In terms of direct flights, we now have direct flights to Singapore and to Kuala Lumpur and through Bali. Of course, we need to improve that, definitely. We are in the process, we are creating a national airline. We already have 2 airplanes. However, I don't think we need to have a direct flight to every single ASEAN capital, because commercially, how many Timorese are going to go to Vientiane and vice versa? So we definitely need to improve connectivity, that's for sure. In terms of infrastructure, the construction has already started of a convention center to be built by a Chinese company. It's a $200 million project that should solve the issue in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of hosting the summits. The airport is being expanded. Yes, you're absolutely right. We have to race against time if we're able to host the summit of the ASEAN Summit 2029. 2029. In 2014, we hosted the summit for the heads of state of the community of Portuguese-speaking countries, which made out of 9 countries, including some very large countries such as Brazil. This was in 2014, 11 years ago, and we did it successfully. Today, we are much better equipped than we were 11 years ago. So there are many challenges. The convention center needs to be done quickly. We need to get the airport upgraded and modernized. We now have access to 5G technology because the fiber optic cable has been connected between Timor and Australia, and another one is expected with Indonesia. Concerning the meetings of ASEAN, yes, that's going to be a challenge. Our Prime Minister was visiting China last April, and he told me, God, I'm going to have to create 2 governments, one to deal with ASEAN and one to govern the country because there's so many meetings. That's going to be a challenge, but our Bruneian friends told us that we don't have to attend all the meetings because they say that they don't attend all the meetings. We have to attend the major ones, but yes, the problem in Timor is not the lack so much of public servants. We actually have too many public servants, about 50,000 of them, which according to the UN, we shouldn't have more than 20,000. The issue is the quality, and that, yes, we need to start serious reforms in our bureaucracy, in our foreign service, because the recruitment process is done in very anarchic ways, and we need to give priority to put the right people in the right place and not just to recruit people for random political reasons. So the infrastructure issue and the human resources issue, yes, it is indeed a problem. But again, as I mentioned, we started our country a mere 23 years ago. In some indicators, we are already, as I mentioned, doing better than some ASEAN countries. Are we going to be ranked with Laos, Cambodia, and Myanmar? I would say yes, for the foreseeable future, yes. Let's be honest about it. It will take time to develop, and particularly to diversify our economy. But as I mentioned, in 2014, we were able to host the summit for the heads of state of the 9 speaking Portuguese countries. Some of them are massive, like Brazil. They landed with 3 aircraft in Timor. It was actually an interesting exercise in logistics because the airplanes were too big for our runway. So the Brazilian Air Force deployed several larger aircraft, landed in Darwin, and then President Lula jumped in a smaller plane, and then but it was done. It was done despite all the challenges that we faced. But yes, all the questions that you raise are indeed pertinent, and I hope with the help of all ASEAN members and others, we will overcome. The other thing is, just to finalize, unlike the European Union, you don't join ASEAN to make money. You see, like, to give an example, Croatia. Croatia is going to, between 2020 and 2030, is slotted to receive 30 billion in aid from the European Union. Portugal has received in the past 40 years, 168 billion euros. There's no such a financial incentives for Timor. We're joining ASEAN because we believe in ASEAN, because we believe that by joining ASEAN, we will be part of the dynamic region, and that the benefits will materialize in other ways rather than direct contribution. As I said, we are a poor country, but we have assisted many other countries in aid. People ask us, why you're poor? Why do you give money to Ukraine? Why do you give money to Guinea-Bissau? Well, sometimes the most poor are the more generous. Thank you. Yes, yes. The process of ASEAN decision making and the issue of consensus. That's an extremely difficult question to address, and I think there's no easy answer, even from far more. I'm not a multilateral person. I'm a bilateral guy, if you will. But I think it's going to be very difficult to replace this principle of consensus, because that's what has kept ASEAN together. However, in extreme cases, we have seen, such as in the case of Myanmar, that ASEAN is able to make difficult decisions. I remember my former boss, Ambassador Barry Desker, was the dean of the Rajaratnam School when I was a research fellow there. In 2005, he wrote an article 20 years ago saying that that Myanmar should be suspended for ASEAN. And at the time, people thought that was just unthinkable. Well, it happened. So ASEAN can evolve. Thank you.
Thank you. And that same question I want to open to Ambassador Puja and Professor Nguyen. The question of, can we look into new ways of making decisions within ASEAN?
First, well, probably before responding to these questions, I just recall that ASEAN has averagely every year about 1,300 meetings. I hope also this will be challenges for every chair. I recall in 2014 when Myanmar was the chair of ASEAN, it was a lot of skeptical at that time whether Myanmar will be able to chair ASEAN. But with whatever the circumstances at that time in 2014, Myanmar managed to chair the whole year of the meeting, in which I had the opportunity to attend so many meetings in Naypyidaw, in Yangon that time, and I hope this will be also the case of Timor-Leste. With regard to the questions posed, I think what we are witnessing now in ASEAN, still consensus and the principle of non-interference is still something sacrosanct. Well, this is something, it's not like a Bible, I believe. So learning from the previous conflicts, ASEAN members experience, especially with regard to the Cambodians, Thailand's conflicts, 2011 and 2025. I think two things that ASEAN can take and things. ASEAN must seize initiative in addressing emerging issues affecting its members and not allow those conflicts to spiral out of control. Second, gradually build confidence and trust of the parties involved, and strike the right balance between the need for certainty on the way forward and flexibility of action. This is something that probably in a ad hoc manner can be conducted. Thank you.
I think that the logistical capacity for, say, East Timor to become effectively performing in ASEAN is very important. But I would like to add two other aspects. One is the domestic politics, and two is the foreign policy aspect. So we have the experience in ASEAN when domestic instability can prevent a certain country to perform the hosting role, the chair. So we have Myanmar, for example. Myanmar has to be skipped from being an ASEAN chair. So when we have domestic instability, the hosting of the ASEAN activities can be at question. The other aspect is the ability to stand firm upholding the ASEAN principles against the influence of extra-regional powers. So 2012, for example, we still have that in mind when ASEAN failed to introduce the joint communique by the performance of the Cambodian host. So I think that we have to think of these two aspects as well when we consider whether an ASEAN chair can be effective or not. So it applies equally to every members, not only East Timor as a new one. About the technical issues, I think that the digitalization helps a lot. And I'm happy to hear from Ambassador Horta that East Timor has established a very efficient internet network. And that helps a lot because we remember two things. One, the COVID-19, when Vietnam was the host of, I'm the chairman of ASEAN 2020, everything was online. And I think that the chairmanship of Vietnam in ASEAN was memorable because of the digitalization. So in case of some radical situation, we can meet online. Two is the disappearance of the practice that was so common before, karaoke and golf. You know why? I asked the successive Vietnam Som. They say that WhatsApp helps a lot. They don't need to meet on the golf course or on the karaoke lounge to discuss the things before the official meeting. They use WhatsApp and they can use it every day. So there is a WhatsApp group among the ASEAN foreign ministers that helps a lot. So I think that we can think big, but still some technical issue with the help of digitization, internet can be really the new areas for the performance of ASEAN.
Sometimes to the extent I wonder how much WhatsApp can replace the camaraderie that they experience, especially during the times when ASEAN was growing in the 70s and 80s, where they had durian parties and karaoke. That really created the trust building and the confidence, right?
Oh yes, the personal contact is
personal
also
contact.
happening, but I just think that the digitalization is a new and supportive element. We do not stop using the other channels that are successful and useful.
Thanks for giving the example of using digitalization and also the use of WhatsApp. I think Ambassador Puja wants to make a quick comment.
Just 2 seconds. You may recall in 2021 when Brunei was chair of ASEAN, they requested the ASEAN Secretariat as a venue for the summit, one of the venue of the summit. I think this is something that probably can be considered that even though the chair is one of the member states, but as the ASEAN Secretariat is in Jakarta, I think the venue for the summit can be used also in Jakarta, in the ASEAN Secretariat. I think this is one of the possibilities also. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm not sure whether I can take another question. Joanne, can I take one more question from the floor? Because I have one gentleman here. Can you make it a very short question? And there's a lady over there, also a short question.
Okay, I will try to speak fast. So one comment, one question. So I did sense from the panelists that there's a relatively narrow conception of conflict, right? So when we look at different conflicts that we have in the region, one can come up with a typology of conflicts. So there's a US-China strategic rivalry. That's a major external conflict that once upon a time ASEAN wanted to mediate. There are intra-ASEAN conflicts. So there's a civil war going on in Myanmar, and ASEAN can understand that as a blatant challenge to some of the fundamental norms that ASEAN seeks to uphold. And then there's a inter-ASEAN member state conflict, and that's Cambodia, Thailand. And then we also have a domestic conflict, right? So recently we've had a social protest in Indonesia and in the Philippines, and there's a socio-economic foundation that undergirds this domestic conflict, and then there's also external dimension to it. And so I think we need to broaden our understanding of conflict in order to deal with these things. So that's first comment. The question that I have is actually a bit harder, and I don't have a good idea about what sort of answers one can come up with. So one thing that really surprises me whenever I look at ASEAN's history is whenever there is some major external challenge facing ASEAN, ASEAN has been able to come up with its own institutional innovation to respond to that external challenge, right? So the beginning of ASEAN in itself is an institutional innovation by Southeast Asian countries to deal with emerging external environment in the 1960s. And then we also had a Kuantan agreement in the 1980s. And then the 1990s institutional expansion to bring the Indo-Chinese countries under one ASEAN framework. Throughout the 2000s, institutional expansion based on ASEAN initiatives. Now we have different set of external challenges today. What sort of institutional innovations can Southeast Asia and ASEAN members can come up with to deal with what you described as an existential threat to ASEAN? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. There's a lady who wanted to ask a question. No? Okay. Huh? I can't see, it's very bright. Yes, can you go to the mic? Or do you have a... Sorry, that's Augustine. Can you go to the mic or someone bring a mic to him?
Thank you, Alex. Sorry, I couldn't walk to the mic. Quick question, Sharon. Since the topic is about moving forward, and the title is in front of all the speakers, I just have a comment/question. 97 forest fires, there was an idea mooted for green helmets, a green version of a rapid deployment task force across ASEAN to tackle climate. So my question for the panel, Asian Development Bank has said it over and over again, the war against climate change will either be won or lost in the Asia-Pacific region. And the evidence is there, 2026, we'll see an increase in climate disasters and possible return of disease X, which is nastier than COVID-19. What does the panel think about ASEAN coming together, since the whole idea is a new age, right? A new opportunity with 11 members now. Green Helmets Rapid Deployment Task Force to tackle climate issues and environmental challenges in the region? Thank you very much.
Thank you. So very quickly, this is open to anyone on the panel. What sort of innovation that ASEAN can deploy to address the current challenges?
Well, to respond those two questions, of course, now it's not only the intra-conflict or inter-conflicts between ASEAN and among or within ASEAN, but also the aspect of it's called non-traditional securities issues. I think it needs to be taken into serious consideration, especially with regard to the second persons, the questions on the climate change. It is something that our regions need to be alert. In particular, how we can work together on the CPS, the climate, peace, and securities issues, in which now ASEAN is touching upon on this very issue. I think quite seriously. We work a lot with United Nations on the climate, peace, and security. We hope, and Prof. Meli also worked very hard on this very issue on climate, peace, and security. In terms of how to create an institutions, this is $1 million questions, I believe, because as ASEAN still very much based on consensus decision-making processes. But of course, ASEAN is not lacking of creativity in finding solution. But the problem is actually, one of the problems is the capacity of the staffs of the ASEAN Secretariat in this respect, whether they have those capacity to like the EU, for example, they have rapid deployment for any time there is a crisis. Also, UN in New York, for example. So that's why the project to strengthening the capacity of members or staff of the ASEAN Secretariat need to be strengthened on this very issue. Even on the institutions aspect, when we introduce the establishment of the pool of experts called Panel of the Wise, something that very low key in our reform institutions in ASEAN still not receive enthusiastic response from our members. That's the issue. On the second questions on the climate change, I recall that in 2008 when ASEAN very solid actually make a very robust decisions on how to help Myanmar with regard to the Nargis cyclone. I think this is something that first, of course, Myanmar that time refused to be open and to be in collaboration with ASEAN, but with very determination from ASEAN members. I think former Secretary General Surin Pitsuwan worked very hard with Indonesian Foreign Minister at the time, Hassan Wiraida, and other ASEAN foreign ministers to force government of Myanmar to open up the assistance for people of Myanmar with regard to the Nargis cyclone. I think this is something that we work before very successfully. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And with that, I also want to let Augustine know that actually we have an ASEAN declaration to the right of the environment that was issued a couple of days ago. So that's a very positive development, and hopefully ASEAN can work on that. And with that, thank you so much for staying all the way with us. I'm told that we have to vacate the room. So please give a warm, a big hand to our panelists.